Good evening. It is Wednesday, December 23rd. It's almost Christmas. I'm going to be doing a different review of the new Star Wars movie, which is just exploding all over the internet. So many people are doing reviews and their feedback. I grew up in that sweet spot in the fact that I was a little boy when the first movie came out. So a lot of us who are 30s, 40s really got to see this thing full cycle from the very beginning to the re-releases in the 90s where they remastered them to the prequels and to now. So I think my generation has a very unique perspective, at least the fans of my generation. Anyway, so um, I'm going to compare George Lucas with C.S. Lewis with J.R.R. Tolkien, which is probably something other reviewers are not going to do. These fiction writers were three of the most influential people in my writing growing up. And I would say, yeah, basically, you don't normally think of George Lucas in the same realm as other prose writers. But what is lasting about the Star Wars movie is the writing. I mean, within a decade, the special effects had been already outdated, but the movies lasted. And the reason I would put forth my thesis, they lasted, is because of the story. And then to take it a step further, my point about all this is the Force, the spiritual component of the story, which is kind of a theme if you read any Tolkien or Lewis, that there's a spiritual component through those stories as well. So it took me a long time to kind of figure out what's the constant in all of these stories that I like: the Lord of the Rings, the Chronicles of Narnia, and the Star Wars trilogy. And it was the spiritual theme throughout the story. Now, I'm not going to claim to be the biggest fanboy out there. I can hold my own with most people on the original trilogy, but the prequels, you lost me. With the new movie, I mean, I'm sure there's people that know it backwards, back to front. So I'm not even going to attempt to exert my knowledge in that realm. But what I will say is, overall, I thought the movie was good. I would say it would fall on my scale somewhere between Empire and Jedi as far as my favorite out of all of the 7 movies. So I would say Star Wars and Empire neck and neck. Then this one is probably on par with Jedi, or maybe slightly better. Now, the thing I don't like about this movie, and it's very different from most people out there, is that they take all of the canon, as they would call it, of the Star Wars universe, expanded universe, that they put out dozens of books in the past decade or two of the storyline following the main characters from the original trilogy. So all these authors were commissioned by Lucasfilm to write these books. And they were thick books, 300 pages, and different authors would have a different trilogy. And Timothy Zahn is the one I read, and another author would come in, and what they were doing is springboarding off the last author, so there's a continuity. So what Lucasfilm did when Disney bought this is they kind of wiped that whole canon and threw it out. And now they're kind of doing, not a reboot, but they're just pretending that almost didn't exist. It's now called like Star Wars Legends. So you have all these wonderfully written books for sci-fi fans, Star Wars fans, and it's kind of been thrown out. So that was my only beef with this. So that aside, I thought it was pretty well written. Very well acted. J.J. Abrams did a phenomenal job of balancing special effects with the real sets that Lucas had back in the original trilogy. As many people have said, the prequels are really kind of like circus for your senses, overloaded with special effects. So, anyway, overall, pretty good movie. The most interesting character was the Grand Admiral Snoke, the super bad guy, who was only appeared as a projection throughout the movie, which is kind of an homage to the way they shown the Emperor in the early series. Very interesting character. His face literally was carbon copy from the Wizard of Oz, 1939 Wizard of Oz, the great and powerful Oz. The projection of the head was amazing. It was like I'm sure it was an homage to The Wizard of Oz because it was so closely resembling the picture. Really interesting character. They portray him in the projection as being like 12 feet tall. I've read somewhere that he's only going to be like 7 feet tall, but it was really neat seeing this ginormous projection of this evil overlord. So I'm not going to give away anything other than that. Overall, pretty good. But yeah, going back to the original trilogy, Lucas was brought up as an editor. He was a filmmaker. So when it came to writing, he really stuck to the textbook for writing a movie. When it came to the original trilogy, it was a 3-act structure. I use Star Wars in my screenwriting class I teach. And it's just a quintessential 3-act structure. You know who the protagonist is. You know who the antagonist is. There's the anti-hero. The conflicts are clear. The internal conflicts, the external conflicts, the theme. Everything is just so clear-cut, whether it's Star Wars or the original trilogy acting as a 3-act structure. So it's just, you know, the original trilogy to me is going to always hold a special place. So my secondary thesis in this is that if you were to remove the Force aspect from the Star Wars movies, I would propose that the movie would not be anywhere near where it is today. The movies. If you were to remove it, you would basically have a secular movie of just starships and starfighters with good character development, and I'm sure it would have a following, but it's the spiritual component that I think is what just elevates it above all these other movies. Perfect example, compare apples to apples. If you took the spiritual component out of Star Wars, you would basically have Star Trek. Now, I don't want to offend any Trekkies out there. I grew up watching, you know, the Next Generation and all these other things. But George Lucas, compared to Gene Roddenberry, you know, you don't see people lined up down the road when a new Star Trek movie comes out. You don't see people getting married at the premiere of a Star Trek movie. You don't see people going fanatical on the internet with costumes and everything when it comes to Star Trek. Now, there's a huge following, but Gene Roddenberry, he was adamant when he was developing the Star Trek series, he did not want a spiritual component to it. He did not want a church or any type of religion interjected into his story. And I think because of that, the Star Trek hit a threshold. It has a glass ceiling it cannot break through that will never allow it to be on par with the Star Wars universe. Just my thought. Now, to back that up, to back that up, let me just give you some data points. The U.S. box office all-time movies, to show that people really are longing for this. We have all-time U.S. box office sales. Avatar, Avengers, Dark Knight, Star Wars, Avengers, Dark Knight, E.T., Hunger Games, Pirates of the Caribbean, Lion King. Do you see a theme here? It's all like otherworldly people with powers not of this world. Oh, by the way, my 3-year-old made me this bracelet, so it's in all my videos. Star Wars, Finding Nemo, Harry Potter, Spider-Man, Passion of the Christ, Transformers, Lord of the Rings, Shrek, Transformers, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Iron Man, Star Wars, Pirates of the Caribbean, Star Wars, Independence Day. You know, there's a couple other regular movies in there, but you can see there's this longing for movies with otherworldly, supernatural, you know, powers above and beyond this world. Now you can say, oh, that's just the U.S. People, so let me go to worldwide box office. And we have worldwide box office all-time sales, Avatar, Avengers, Harry Potter, Frozen, Iron Man, Transformers, Dark Knight, Transformers, Pirates of the Caribbean, Star Wars, Alice in Wonderland, The Hobbit, Dark Knight, Harry Potter, Hobbit, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and the list goes on. So basically, people want movies that show them hope beyond this world. Now, coming full circle back to Tolkien, Lewis, and George Lucas. again, what attracted me personally to these stories growing up was the spiritual theme, and I really think it was some important baby steps on my path to Christianity. Now, when I was studying for my master's, these two books, this one is about the spiritual aspect of the Lord of the Rings, The Battle for Middle-earth by Fleming Rutledge, and this one, The Way into Narnia by Peter Shackle. Now I'm going to read a couple paragraphs, and I'll finish with that. So, in this book, The Way into Narnia, Peter Shackle is quoting Tolkien and C.S. Lewis when they're talking about fairy stories and why they're so appealing to adults and to children. Tolkien asserts further that the appeal of fairy stories lies chiefly in their ability to awaken and at least partially to satisfy a sense of longing, a longing inherent in the nature of fairy itself. It is a primal desire to get outside the world of everyday experience, a desire to fly, to communicate with animals, to meet living things not present in our world. It is a desire for an other world, a world richer and more resonant idea than the world of everyday experience. Lewis, taking Tolkien's point further, states that the desire for an enchanted other world is, in fact, a longing for a spiritual other world, a desire for our own far-off country, as he put it in his 1941 sermon, The Weight of Glory. This is it. In longing for elves, dragons, and the realm of fairy, we are actually longing for God in the heavenly realm. Hi, Leah. So, that applies to the Force as well. So people who are obsessed with the Force and the story of Star Wars and see a deeper connection with it, I believe are longing for the divine and longing for God in heaven. So that's just my thoughts. Have a great day. I thank you for watching. Leah, say good night.
Good night.
All right. Good night.